Hello everyone, DonTheCrown here, and today I want to talk about another campaign guide, and this time for Gemma 3, Flame of Pleasure. And this is a very strong character to start the season with. She is all about focusing on fire damage, and there are, a lot of very powerful fire skills out there right now. And you can pretty much choose if you're going to stay melee, like you level up as melee in the campaign, but you can also switch to spells once you make it into the, the Netherrealm. And there is even a new fire skill, the Serpent Beam skill, which could potentially be very strong. And, it being a fire skill, she being a fire caster, kind of like a match made in heaven here. Now, in the campaign, we are going to be using the fire skill Hammer of Ash from level 1 all the way through the campaign. It is a very powerful melee skill. And what it does is it bonks the ground here and then shoots out 3 projectiles. And you might notice that those projectiles kind of explode. Well, they don't always explode because it is using demolisher charges. Demolisher charges are basically a mechanic that charges up over time, over 3 seconds baseline. You can speed that up, obviously. And when the demolish charge is available, it will be consumed by the skill in order to do more damage or special effects. And this particular skill's special effect is it makes the projectiles explode, and it also makes it do a lot more damage, which we'll talk about here in a second. But one of the tricks with this particular skill is we can actually have more than one Hammer of Ash in the bar. And what that means is we can go and use both of them back to back to do some big burst damage. This allows us to really just blow enemies up. And the skill is also kind of interesting because you want to make sure that when you are attacking enemies that you are not directly on top of them, because it can make it very difficult for the projectiles to actually come back and hit whatever the target is. And so realistically, the best is to kind of hit far enough away that you're going to just barely hit them on the edge, and then the projectiles will explode right behind them. They can all hit and have a shotgunning effect. And so you could definitely just double tap real quickly and just, get a big blow up. Now, the demolisher charge itself, when it actually does pop off, makes it so that you do 215% additional damage when the skill consumes the demolisher charge. So having 2 hammers available here is very, very powerful. In fact, it's a very big burst. I was talking to some people who play this character pretty seriously, and even in the campaign they were saying that sometimes they just go 3 hammers and they get rid of their compound source. I don't know if I can recommend that for my guide, simply because it's something you have to be kind of experienced with doing, but yeah, it's pretty nice. Now, this whole thing is going to have a written guide, which I'll link down in the description down below. And I'm not necessarily going to go through all of the things about the leveling here, especially because I have a step-by-step leveling section down here for you. But we will talk about basically the final skill setup and some of the ideal gear. Now, this character is actually very blessed when it comes to gear that comes out of treasure troves, with pretty much almost every single slot except for your weapon having a thing from a treasure trove here. Scarlet Decrees, nice multiplier. Chain of Resistance is really nice. Desire Survival gives you some survivability. Born in Fire Rings gives you life and scaling fire damage. This should actually just be 1 rare weapon. We're going to be using a 2-handed weapon. And then Furious Man's Body and Boom Gloves come out of the last treasure trove, which give us a nice little boost into Netherrealm, and then Grace Boots as well. All of these are just really, really great things. But that kind of reminds me that this is a attack build. And so if you've never played an attack build, it's really important for you to remember to keep an eye on upgrading your weapon, because your weapon is basically the core of the build, especially while you're leveling through the campaign. So you want to keep an eye on the loot feed that pops up right behind where I'm sitting. And if you see a weapon on the loot feed with a green arrow up, probably want to equip that. And we're probably going to want to stick with mostly 2-handed weapons the whole time, because it's just a lot easier to switch between 2-handed weapons than to kind of juggle between 1-handed. I don't really like it at all. Our other skill slots are pretty much going to be our potion and shadow dash, and we're going to be using 2 of these. Now, they are making some changes to the leap attack skill in this upcoming patch, so you might want to try that out and see if it feels okay. But double shadow dash is kind of ridiculous because of how charges work. So shadow dash comes with a base 2 charges to it. And so what we're going to do is we're going to put 2 of them on our bar, And this is just very overpowered because normally if I dashed twice, I need to wait for 2 charges to build up over time, which takes about this long. And if we have 2 of them though, and I use both, all I have to wait is for both of them to charge once like it did right there, and it's twice as fast. And we can continue to use our dashes like that as long as we are using them where they're at 2 charges or more. If you use that last charge on either skill, it actually consumes a charge, or it sets both of them on cooldown, which is a very bad thing you do not want to do. And so like if I do all W's here, it eats all 3 charges from the R button. You don't want to do that. So you just want to basically alternate whenever there is 2 charges up. You're going to have basically double the normal movement speed from movement skills that you normally have. I want to talk about hero trait real quick. And like, here's a little section about the movement speed tech there as well. So the hero trait to me was a little bit confusing about what's going on. It's called Flame of Pleasure and talks about purgatory. And when I first read this, I was really confused. But basically the way this works is when you are near enemies, you will potentially proc your little purgatory here. I have 2 charges because of a later trait, but basically this is a big ring that goes around you. And if you are near an enemy and it's off cooldown and it's not on you, it will proc for you. And this ring just increases the amount of fire damage that enemies take within it. And it's just very, very, very powerful. This is part of why going fire skills on this particular character is very good, because you can just keep this up almost the full time, and is just like a 45% additional damage. Now when you first get it, it's going to be a little bit smaller here. I'll let it go reset here, but as you can see, once you get your first trait, it's practically screen wide, so it's pretty easy to deal with. And yeah, for our passive trees, I have these kind of out here as well. We're going God of Might. This just gives us solid damage. It does give us this momentum main talent, which buffs our next attack every, I think it is 0.5 seconds. This at first glance kind of seems bad, but the way that we're like going to be going through the campaign anyways, you're not going to be attacking all that frequently. And so this can just really take those giant demolisher hits really to the next level. You could potentially go and do elimination instead if you want to take that. Elimination is still like a 23% damage increase. I don't know if somebody in the comments will correct me if I'm wrong, but this is mostly just used for bosses. Onslaughter is really nice as well. This is like our 2-handed damage tree, and taking sweep gives you additional damage and area, which is really important for those explosions from the projectiles. And then lastly, we're gonna go Warlord here. This gives us some strength scaling kind of stuff. We also get fueling, which sets nearby enemies fire resist to 0, which is very nice for increased damage. Now, as you're going through the campaign in Overrealm season, you're going to just come across these portals here that look like this. And when you interact with them, a whole bunch of enemies are probably going to pop out. You want to be really careful with this because we're not really sure how well this is going to be balanced, especially at the start of the season. Sometimes you could just be like a whole ton of enemies pop out and just absolutely just pile on you. And so they could be dangerous. Also, not really sure how much experience or loot these are going to provide. And so maybe like do 1 or 2 of them, and it seems to give you some good experience and loot, keep doing them. But one of the things that this season can do is that once you clear all the enemies out of the portal, this portal will like open up and you'll be able to go into it and kind of go over into the Overrealm and kind of like do extra clearing of extra enemies and stuff. And it's not really clear whether or not that's going to be worth doing for any reason during the campaign. Maybe do 1 of them, and if it provides you with like mega loot and XP, awesome, you can like potentially do that. But we get a lot of good loot from our treasure troves already. So unless it's giving out some sort of boss weapon or maybe a prism or something, which is the new scaling mechanic, it's probably not worth doing. Now for the whole step-by-step, I have everything in here with like all of the different links and stuff you're going to need. I did mention this part here, but I'll mention it again. It is pretty important that you want to drop the main hit of the Hammer of Ash a little bit away from whatever you're trying to kill so that you hit with both the projectile explosion and the main hit. You can kind of think of it as like the circle in front of you. You want that to like just barely touch the enemy so that the projectiles can come out of it and still hit it. If you're like directly on top of the enemy, the projectiles are just going to keep going off into Narnia, and they aren't going to actually explode on the target. So there's a pretty big difference between the two. Definitely want to keep that in mind, and don't forget to hit your additional, second Demolisher Hammer of Ash here for even more burst. And that's pretty much it. My last little piece of advice is when you kill the Lion King in the campaign, he's going to be a big lion guy. He's going to drop a hero memory like this. And you are going to want to make sure that if you're not level 45, that you're going to want to lock this so you don't accidentally scrap it. And then the same thing happens at the end of the campaign. The big dragon boss will drop a memory of discipline, and you want to make sure that you lock this because you are not going to be able to equip this most likely at the end of the campaign. And nothing is sadder than scrapping this because you'll hit level 60 and you'll go to install your hero memory and you won't have anything. So definitely keep your eye out for that. You can drop more obviously later in the, the Nether Realm, but it is a little bit more difficult. And you're just going to take the 2 right side traits here is what I recommend. Hopefully this video helped you out. Come to the stream if you have any questions. You can check out the written guide over on Heroic. I'll put that link in the description. Hope you just have a good one.